All right, good morning, everyone. Okay. My name is Courtney Hershey, for those who don't know me, and today is the first time that I have ever preached a sermon. So, thank you. I usually teach kids, which is way more comfortable for me, so I'm feeling a little nervous. I'm also an introvert, and I get tired from talking. So this is going to be a challenge for me to continue talking for this amount of time on my own. So I might have you just talk a little bit so I can rest a little. Um, so we're in a sermon series, and Ruth Martin and Nikki Habecker have both already done a wonderful job of speaking about the topic of birth in the Bible. Ruth specifically addressed the longings or desires that can be both met or not met in the context of birth, and she asked us if Jesus is enough to be the end goal of all of our longings. Nikki shared how grief can accompany the topic of birth and stated that grief is best experienced and expressed in community. So I'm greatly oversimplifying their messages. So please, if you haven't already listened to them, give them a listen. They spoke much more deeply on those topics. Both Ruth and Nikki shared some of their personal experiences, and I'll be doing that too. And I wanted to say that I admire both of them greatly for their intellect and their skill with speaking. However, I am much less polished and articulate than they are, so I'm going to be reading my sermon today. Oops, as there's no way I can remember everything and speak clearly at the same time or hold the clicker up here at the same time too, without dropping it. So, as you've heard, my assignment is to teach about a birth narrative in the Bible. So I wanted to ask you, when you think of birth, what do you think of? So if you can just take 10 seconds, talk to your neighbor, and when you think of the word birth, tell them what comes to mind. Okay, time's up. From the noise and the laughter, I'm guessing that you thought of something positive, or maybe even funny when you think of the word birth. So I looked up the definition of birth and found that it is defined as the start of life as a physically separate being, or the emergence of a new individual from the body of its parent, or it's defined as the beginning or start. And as a verb, birth means to bring forth or to give rise to. And I don't know about you, but I typically think of birth as something positive. I think of it as a new start, as something beautiful and wonderful, because it's just the beginning of something. And there are so many possibilities for what is to come in the future. So today I'd like to share with you a birth narrative that begins in Exodus 1. And you can follow in your Bible if you want to, or you can just listen as I read it. And Exodus 1 is kind of the background for the main story that I will be referencing. So here is Exodus 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt with Jacob, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah; Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin; Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph and all of his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. Then a new king, who did not know about Joseph, came to power in Egypt. "Look," he said to his people, "the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country." So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, "When you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live." The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: "Every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live." So, what a time to be pregnant in Egypt. The Israelite people, God's people, were being oppressed by the Egyptians and forced to do hard labor. However, all of this hard work was making them strong, and God was blessing them with healthy families. Pharaoh did not like that the Israelites were so strong, and he was afraid they'd rebel against him. So he gave the order that all baby boys born to the Israelites would have to be thrown into the Nile River. Pharaoh, though, I think he must not have been aware of the strength of females because he let all the girls live. Just a side note. Now, I've heard many expectant parents say that they don't care if their baby is a boy or a girl. They just want their child to be healthy. But I don't think that was the case during this time in Egypt. I'm betting that all the pregnant women wanted to have baby girls so they could live. Can you imagine giving birth to a baby boy only to have him thrown into a river? It would be a terrible loss. I just can't imagine what fear mothers and fathers who were expecting babies must have experienced during this time and place in history. Having a new baby is scary enough, with not knowing if the baby and mother will come out of the birth experience healthy and whole, and then harboring the additional fear that your baby, who you've barely even seen, being put to death. That's like a nightmare, I think, for a new parent. I remember being very concerned and unsure about how to best nurture and care for my firstborn baby, actually all of them, but especially the first one. And when I held my baby for the first time, I felt overwhelming love and gratitude for him, but also a huge responsibility for his well-being. I felt like it was up to me for not only my baby to survive, but for him to thrive. It was a huge honor to raise him, but it was also a huge responsibility, and I would say for me it even felt like a burden. So I think giving birth evokes lots of positive emotions, but it also brings forth emotions you may not expect, fear being one of them. So I would like to share with you a little of the birth story of my firstborn child, Caleb. I tend to cry whenever I speak up here, so I am apologizing for that. I hope that I don't cry too much. So to tell you about the story of Caleb's birth, I'll need to give you a little background about me. When I was in middle school, we're going back a long time, I played field hockey, and I think that I was pretty good at it. But the summer before 9th grade, when I was going to be going into high school, I knew that I had to get myself into good shape and work on my skills because it was rumored that the high school team was a lot better and more competitive, and just it was much more difficult than playing at the junior high level. So during that summer, I decided that I was going to run to get into shape for field hockey. Then when practice started, I did okay at the hockey drills, but when we'd run, I'd always run faster than the other girls. So I was very disappointed when we had our first 2 scrimmages for the season, and the coach didn't let me start on the JV team. I was really upset. I had worked really hard, and I thought I had earned the spot of a starter. So I decided that I was going to make a big change. Thank you. I decided that I was going to quit field hockey and join the cross-country team. And so I went to cross-country practice, and I ran just 2 practices before we had our first meet. And I still remember then when we had our first meet, it was at Elizabethtown High School. And before you run the race, you walk the course. So we walked the cross-country course, and I learned all about the rules of the sport and everything. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the great sport of cross-country, in high school, the boys and girls teams run a 5K, which is 3.1 miles. And we run it over a course that can include grass, trails, hills, or pavement, whatever each individual school provides for their course. And so I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. But by the end of the first race, I had won. And that was when I discovered my gift, a gift that God had given to me. I was a long distance runner. And after I discovered that, I started to run longer than everybody else, lift, do ab exercises, try to go to bed early, and I didn't take a single day off from running. And so by the end of my senior year, there's me. I look the same, right? So by the end of my senior year of high school, I had won just a lot of awards, and it was a really awesome experience. And then I was able to attend Princeton University and ran Division I cross country and track there too. And those were really good, glory-filled days. However, they were also very stressful days. And I thought that I had developed an identity for myself. I was Courtney Hershey, the distance runner. But by the end of my college days, the pressures of running well had overwhelmed me, and my racing goals changed from doing the best I could in each race to just trying not to lose my reputation and the standing I had built in running. Instead of running because I enjoyed it, I ran to live up to the expectations I thought others had of me, and also not to disappoint myself. So I was pretty much stuck. It was like a cycle of perfectionism, control for sure, and also fear. Now, fast forward to a few years after I graduated from college, and I had married Matt, and we found out that I was pregnant. And when we found out that I was pregnant, I actually felt kind of relieved because no one expected a pregnant lady to win races. Anyway, I thought that after I had my baby, I'd be able to pick up where I had left off beforehand. I would be able to still run fast. I could work, I could go to graduate school, we could go hiking in the Rockies. We were living in Colorado at that time. And I could do everything I'd done before. We would just take our baby along. Well, Caleb Matthew Hershey was born on November 29th, 2003, a little over 20 years ago. Can't believe it's been that long. There we are in the hospital when we were taking Caleb home. Caleb was very amazing, and I knew that God had special plans for his life. However, my plans to do everything I had done before he was born didn't quite happen, as I'm sure you're not surprised to find out if you've ever had any children. So, in addition to feeling joyful that I had a son, I also felt tired, overwhelmed, a little disappointed, fearful, and definitely out of control. I was afraid that I no longer had my identity that I had had before, that I would never be a good runner again, that everything I'd done in the past really had no meaning, and that all I'd ever do for the rest of my life would be to take care of my son. When I was racing, I was in control of my training, what I ate, how much I slept, and how hard and how much I ran. But now, I felt like I couldn't control anything. I felt like I was always awake and that I really didn't do anything productive. I was also afraid that I wouldn't be a good mom. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to feed him. I didn't really know how to burp him. It seemed like everyone else could do that so easily. And Matt, you probably remember, we would like try to hold him over our leg and do all these techniques that we saw other people doing, and it didn't really work. I didn't know how to really get him on a schedule. And I also thought I needed to teach him, even though he was an infant, and I wasn't really sure how to do that. So I was just really afraid of failing, and I came to the realization that birth, in addition to all the positives, also carried with it loss of self, of dreams, of carefree living, of freedom, and especially of my ability to control my life. Sorry, one second. Let's turn my page. So now I want to go back to Exodus. And in Exodus chapter 2 now, verses 1 through 4, it says, I took my bookmarker out, so it'll take me just a little minute. Okay. Now, a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. So, I said that I was fearful and felt out of control when I had Caleb. Well, I can't imagine the fear that this Levite woman, who we later learned was named Jochebed. Did I say that right, Jim? Jochebed. Okay. Who we later learned was named Jochebed, felt when she had a baby boy. Her newborn son was supposed to be thrown into the Nile River. She had just given birth to him, but she was probably thinking, I'm going to have to plan his funeral. Every moment after his birth, she must have been consumed with protecting her son, always on the lookout for someone who wanted to kill him. It says that she hid him for 3 months. Those 3 months must have felt like an eternity. It's hard to sleep in general when you have a newborn because they seem to require 24-hour care, but I'm guessing that Jochebed did not let herself sleep at all. She probably felt that she needed to keep watch over him all of the time. Finally, after those 3 months, she realized that she couldn't hide her baby anymore. Now, I don't know exactly what I would have done if I had been in her situation, but I think I would have tried to keep hiding my baby. I think I would have kept him close to me at all times, thinking that I was the only one who could keep him safe. But that is not what Jochebed did. At first glance, it seems like she was careless. She made a basket for him, and she put her baby in the Nile River, the very place where he was supposed to be thrown to his death. And she had her young daughter stand by to watch what would happen to him. She didn't even stand watch herself. So, I thought that was careless. I thought that's something I would never do. But after thinking about it more and through reading some other sources, I don't think she was being careless. In fact, I think her actions were based on her great faith in God. So Jochebed did 3 things. First, she knew her son was a special child. And I don't know what that means. Maybe God revealed this to her in the way that he looked or just through a nudging she felt from God. But she listened to who God said her son was, and she believed God. Secondly, she, in faith, took her son and placed him in the river. So she was obeying what Pharaoh said that she should do. His decree was to put your baby in the river, so she did. She left her baby on the river in a basket, expecting God to care for him, maybe even bringing forth a miracle on the baby's behalf. And then thirdly, and I think most importantly, Jochebed let go. There we go. She let go of her baby. She gave up her belief in her own strength and control, and she trusted God. She gave her fears to God, and she believed that his plan for her baby would be accomplished. And, she stationed her daughter nearby to watch over him. Maybe she did that because if she had been standing there, it would look suspicious because here's a grown woman standing by the river where babies are supposed to be thrown. But I think she had her daughter stand there because she didn't need to be there, because she knew that God was in control, not her. But do you know how hard that would be to let go like she did? To let your baby who was supposed to be killed out of your sight? And then if her baby would be killed, what kind of mother would she be? Neglectful, unloving, unwise. So I think I would have held on tighter if that had been me. That's pretty much what I did when Caleb was born. I believed I was the only person who could raise him in a healthy way. So I spent his every waking moment interacting with him. In addition to all of the daily baby maintenance activities, I played with him, I read to him, I sang to him. I even hung these colored pictures on the wall for him to look at because I had read that it was good for his brain development. Matt shaking his head. And I did not enjoy my life at that point in time, and I drove myself crazy, and I probably drove Matt crazy too. And I just felt like my identity as a separate person was gone. But not Jehoshaphat, who was facing real danger. She chose not to control the events of her life or her son's life, and she gave her fears to God. She saw that through giving up control, she was actually kind of giving birth to new life. So God delivered. So in Exodus 2, verses 5 to 10, it says, "Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and she saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. 'This is one of the Hebrew babies,' she said. Then his sister, the baby's sister, asked Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?' 'Yes, go,' she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you.' So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, 'I drew him out of the water.'" So because of Jehoshaphat's faith in God, she not only got to raise her son, she got paid to do it. The act of giving up her son led to the saving of his life. Pharaoh's very daughter heard the baby's cry, saw him in the basket, and had compassion on him. Not thinking of herself or even the laws of the land, Pharaoh's daughter let the baby live. She really had nothing to gain from choosing to save the Hebrew baby she found and then later adopting him. She didn't know who the baby, who she named Moses, would become. And neither did Moses' biological mother, Jehoshaphat. Both of the mothers were moved into action by compassion and love for a baby. These events seem so remarkable that I think they had to have occurred due to divine intervention. Don't you think so? And I don't think Pharaoh's daughter worshiped God, but she was selfless enough to want to be the baby's mother and to let him live. And through her actions and also Jehoshaphat's faith, God protected and brought up Moses, who became the deliverer of the Israelite people from the oppression of the Egyptians. Now, for me, it took a lot longer than Jehoshaphat to realize that I was not in control, that I wasn't the sole protector of my son, and that my identity wasn't lost because I was now a mother. I pretty much kicked and screamed through the early years of both Caleb and then Savannah's lives, striving to be the perfect mom, and also fighting hard to be able to run fast and fulfill my purpose through work I also did outside of our home. But I think if I had only let go sooner, like Jehoshaphat did, and allowed God to care for my kids, and also most of all tell me who I am, my life would have been smoother and more purpose-filled. I wish I had stopped acting like I was in control And I wish I had realized that I'm God's daughter, and he will take care of everything else if I follow him and just let go. The birth of my kids, especially that of Caleb, and the story of Jehoshaphat's faith has taught me that. Now, 20 years later, I have been forced to let go of my son, because you guys know, there he is. He lives in Colorado, where he attends Colorado Christian University, and he's a long-distance runner like his mom. But first and foremost, though, he is a child of God. So, now I would like you to ask yourself, think about this in your head. What are you holding on to that you need to let go of? What are you trying to control that is uncontrollable? I'm sorry to say you cannot control whatever it is that you're trying to control, but you're also not solely responsible for it. Maybe you feel stressed out at work and you think you need to work harder to make things better. Maybe you're in a relationship and you think you have to change the other person. Maybe you think you need to be the best at something, so you keep striving and controlling to be number one. And I'm talking to myself here just as much as I'm talking to you. So just think about those things that maybe you are trying to control, that you need to let go of and give to God. And I just hope that we all can remember to let go of our illusions of control and instead trust in God even when we're fearful and we feel like we've lost our identity. We need to wait for God's plan to be revealed, like Jehoshaphat did. And we might not all give birth to a deliverer of God's people, but I am certain that God has something good planned for us when we let go of our fear and our need to control and we trust him.